Have you ever witnessed a family hand their own daughter official disownment papers as a birthday gift? While filming her reaction for entertainment. That's exactly what happened to me on my 30th birthday. While other families gift jewelry or vacations, mine orchestrated a public humiliation. Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family? Let me know your story down in the comments. Growing up in the Miller family meant living in the shadow of a very specific kind of success. My father, Michael Miller, was a powerhouse venture capitalist, turning ideas into imperies. My mother, Jennifer, was one of the most connected political lobbyists in D.C., a kingmaker in a designer suit. My sister, Jessica, 2 years older, was the golden child, a brilliant, ruthless corporate lawyer, already on the fast track to partner. And then there was me, Belle, the 30-year-old disappointment. I wasn't a lawyer. I wasn't a banker. I had a master's degree in art history, and I worked as a low-level coordinator at one of New York's most prestigious art museums. My salary was $70,000 a year. In their world, that wasn't a rounding error. It was a joke. The humiliation wasn't a single event. It was the air I breathed. It was the constant, low-level static of my life. Last Thanksgiving, my father stood up at the head of the long, polished table. He raised his glass. "A toast?" he announced. "To Jessica, on her way to making partner. We are so proud." The whole family clapped, their diamonds catching the light. A minute later, as the staff cleared the plates, my mother leaned over to me. Her voice was a cold whisper, sharp with perfume. "Belle, darling, be a dear and help the staff with those plates. You're, used to serving." And the worst part, the stupid, aching, childish part of me that just wanted them to see me. I did it. I stood up in my nice dress, and I cleared my family's plates, like I was the help. You're probably asking why. Why did I even show up? Why did I keep answering their calls? It was because of this tiny, stupid flicker of hope. This hope that this time would be different. Every time my phone buzzed with Mom or Dad, I'd feel that sick lurch in my stomach. I'd think, maybe this time she'll say she's proud of me. Maybe this time he'll ask about my research and actually listen. But that time never, ever came. The calls were always about them, about the family image. 2 months ago, my father called me at work. "Belle, your mother's political action fund needs another $5,000 to close out the quarter. It's for the family. Just do it. Family supports family." That was the line. But the support only ever flowed one way. That $5,000 was everything I had managed to save. It was my emergency fund. It was my future. But I did it. I transferred the money. For the hope. A week later, I saw my mother featured in a society magazine, smiling at a gala, accepting an award for her generous personal contribution of $50,000. My money was just absorbed, swallowed whole to fuel her image. While I was checking my bank account to see if I could afford groceries, I was living on stale coffee and pure, uncut anxiety. My body was falling apart. I was paying for a therapist, out of pocket. Because in my family's world, therapy is for the weak. At our last session, she was looking over the results of a blood panel my doctor had ordered. Her face was serious. "Belle," she said gently, "your cortisol levels are dangerously high. The insomnia, the panic attacks you're having, the constant knot in your stomach. Your body is screaming at you. This level of sustained stress, it's poisoning you." I just shook my head. The tears I always held back, finally starting to burn. "I don't understand. Why am I like this? Why am I so sensitive? My mother can handle senators. My sister can handle billion-dollar mergers. Why can't I even handle a family dinner?" She put down her pen and looked right at me. "Belle, you are not too sensitive. You are being systematically abused. You're in a classic narcissistic family system." I'd never heard those words before. "Think of it this way," she explained. "Your parents are at the center. They demand total loyalty and perfection. Your sister, Jessica, is the golden child. She reflects their success. She does exactly what they want. She's their mirror. She proves they're good parents. And me, I whispered, though I already knew the answer. You, she said, and her words hit me like a physical blow, are the scapegoat. You're the one they've designated to carry all the family's failures, all their disappointment, all their insecurities, all their darkness. They project it all onto you. She leaned forward. They need you to be the failure, Belle. They need you to be the sensitive one, the broke one. It's the only way they can maintain their own image of perfection. They don't just tolerate your struggle. They require it. It was like a light switch had been flicked on in a dark, cold room. For 30 years, I thought I was the problem. But in that moment, I realized I wasn't the problem at all. I was the solution. Their solution. And I was done. It all came to a head on a rainy Tuesday night in October. It was the museum's biggest night of the year, the opening of the new Al Jamil wing. Funded by one of the wealthiest and most philately billionaires from the Middle East. He was our biggest donor. And he was furious. I wasn't even supposed to be there. I was just the coordinator. Which meant I was in charge of making sure the executive team had coffee and that the placards were spelled correctly. I was standing in the back hallway, trying to be invisible, when I heard the shouting. This is an insult, a disgrace. I peeked through the door. The donor, a man who could buy the entire building, was red-faced. My boss, the chief curator, William Anderson, looked like he was about to faint. The centerpiece, the donor yelled. The entire point of the exhibit. Where is it? William was trembling. Sir. It's a customs issue. A clerical error. The $3 million sculpture. It's stuck in customs at JFK. We can get it here by Thursday. Thursday, the man's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. The opening is tonight. The press is tonight. You promised me this. This is a violation of our agreement. He pointed a finger at William. I am pulling the funding. All of it. The $3 million donation. And the future partnership. We are done. The room went cold. This wasn't just a disaster. It was an extinction-level event for the museum. And that's when I moved. I didn't know what I was doing. Exactly. I just walked in. My cheap heels clicked on the marble floor. Excuse me, I said. William looked at me like I was insane. Well, not now. Get out. But the donor had turned his sharp, angry eyes on me. I took a breath and I looked directly at him. And I spoke. Not in English, but in the formal, classical Arabic that I had spent 6 years perfecting for my master's thesis on Islamic art. Sir, I said in his language, what they have done is not just a logistical failure. It is a failure of respect. And for that, I offer the deepest apology on behalf of this institution. His anger didn't vanish, but his eyes narrowed. He was surprised. He replied in Arabic. And who are you, the coffee girl? I am Belle Miller, I said. And I am the person who read your thesis on pre-Islamic artifacts. That. I got his attention. I know why you chose that sculpture, I continued, still in Arabic, because it represents the fusion of two cultures. But, if I may be so bold, the piece stuck at the airport is not the true treasure of this museum. William looked at me, his face white. Belle, what are you doing? I ignored him. There is a piece, I said to the donor. In Vault 23. It has been in storage for 50 years. It is a 17th century astrolabe from an artisan in your specific home region. It is not worth $3 million. But it is, culturally speaking, priceless. It represents more than fusion. It represents the origin of the very navigation that built your family's shipping empire. He was silent. He just stared at me. Give me 3 hours, I said. Not for them. For me. Let me show you what I mean. Let me honor you in the way you deserve to be honored. He didn't speak for a full minute. Then, he gave a single, sharp nod. 3 hours. I spent the next 3 hours in a full-on sprint. I convinced a terrified William to grant me access to the vault. I directed the lighting crew. I rewrote the entire exhibit introduction on the spot. At 8:45, we reopened the doors. The new centerpiece wasn't a flashy modern sculpture. It was the small, intricate, ancient astrolabe, lit like a diamond in the center of the room. The donor walked in. He looked at the piece. He read the new placard I had written. Then he turned to me. He didn't speak. He just bowed. A slight, almost imperceptible bow. From one scholar to another, he turned to a pale, sweating William Anderson. My funding is doubled, he announced. On one condition. She oversees the cultural integration. He walked out. William just stared at me, his mouth open. How did you do that? I've been studying for this my whole life, I whispered. What I didn't know, what I couldn't possibly have known, was that someone else had been in the room? A man, standing in the shadows by the exit, listening to the entire exchange. He wasn't a donor. He wasn't a curator. He was David Thomas, the CEO of the most powerful private art management firm in the world. And he had just seen everything. The next morning, an email landed in my museum inbox. It wasn't from William, my boss. It wasn't from anyone in the museum. The sender was David Thomas. The subject line was simply yesterday evening. My heart hammered. David Thomas was a legend. His firm didn't just advise collectors, they managed the priceless, multi-billion-dollar art portfolios for entire corporations and countries. He was the kingmaker of the art world. He had been the man standing in the shadows. He wanted to meet, for coffee, in 1 hour. I sat across from him in a tiny, discreet cafe, 2 blocks away. He looked at me, his eyes analytical. What you did last night, he started, was extraordinary. I tried to be modest, the way I was trained to be. I just did my job. I knew the collection. He cut me off. No. Stop. He leaned forward. My firm is full of Ivy League MBAs who can speak transactional Arabic. They can book flights and negotiate shipping costs. Any of them could have gotten the sculpture out of customs by Thursday. He took a sip of his espresso. What none of them could have done is what you did. You didn't just solve a logistics problem. You solved a cultural one. You understood why he was angry. It wasn't about the sculpture. It was about respect. It was about face. This was the part I'll never forget. Belle, he said. My team understands language. You understand what I call the third space. It's that invisible cultural territory between the words, where all the real meaning is exchanged. You don't just translate language, you translate intent. You translate honor. You translate history. In my world, that isn't a soft skill. Belle, that is the single most valuable and most dangerous strategic weapon there is. I just stared at him. In 20 minutes. This man had seen more of me than my own family had in 30 years. My firm is launching a new division, he said, his voice dropping. Global Cultura Strategy. And I want you to consider helping me build it. He didn't offer me a job. He offered me a challenge. A 5-round, 3-month-long interview process. It was the most grueling, intense, professional gauntlet I had ever experienced. And it was all in absolute secrecy. I'd work my 9-to-5 job at the museum, taking my family's dismissive phone calls on my lunch break. And then I'd go home and work until 3 a.m. for David Thomas. The second round was a case study. A client in Tokyo feels their billion-dollar collection is being disrespected by Western curators. Solve it. I didn't just solve it. I spent 72 hours researching, writing a 40-page strategic proposal that went into Shinto philosophy, the aesthetics of Ma, or negative space, and how it applied to museum architecture. I created an entire new framework for respectful exhibition. The fourth round was a practical test, a staged crisis, with actors playing difficult international clients. I resolved it in 12 minutes. The actors broke character to applaud. The final round was just me and David. In his office on the 47th floor, He pushed a single folder across his mahogany desk. "This is exceptional," he'd said about my proposal. My board was stunned. He opened the folder. Director of Culture. $350,000 base salary. $600,000 in equity. Vesting over 4 years. And a new start. It was January 10th. My hand didn't shake as I signed my name. "Welcome to the firm, Belle," David said, shaking my hand. "Your new life starts on March 1st. I gave my notice at the museum. I told them I was taking a sabbatical. I told my family nothing. February 28th. My 30th birthday. My new life was set to begin in exactly 36 hours. I was counting down the minutes. Then, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Surprise. Darling, we're taking you out for your big day. 7 p.m. Le Jardin. Dress nicely. Le Jardin." My stomach dropped. It was the most exclusive, expensive restaurant in the city. The kind of place where a single entree cost more than my monthly utilities. It was where they took clients to close deals. It was not where they took me. I knew, instantly, that it was a trap. It was an ambush. But it was the last one. I just had to get through this one. Last time, when I arrived, they were in the private dining room. And it wasn't just them. My aunt and uncle were there. Cousins I hadn't seen in months. They'd assembled an audience. "Surprise," my mother chirped, her voice a little too bright. My sister, Jessica, was already sitting down, her phone propped up on the table, the small red recording light glowing. "You're going to want to remember this birthday, Belle," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "It's a special one." We sat. They ordered $800 bottles of champagne. My father, Michael, stood up, raising his glass for a toast. "To Belle's future," he announced, his voice flat. "May it finally begin." The words hung in the air, thick with disappointment. And then, as if they had rehearsed it, which they probably had, the assault began. My father started. 30 years old. Belle. 30. He sighed. "A performance of paternal regret. And you're still wasting that Ivy League degree, giving tours at a museum for $70,000 a year. It's pathetic." My mother, Jennifer, chimed in, twisting the pearls at her neck. "We simply can't keep making excuses for you to senators." "Oh. Belle is just finding herself. It's humiliating. You embarrass us?" "Belle." Jessica, phone still steady, added her line, her voice dripping with fake concern. "People always ask what my little sister does. And I just have to lie. I tell them you're in art acquisitions. It sounds so much better than tour guide." I just sat there. I said nothing. I picked up my silver knife and fork and began to cut my untouched food into perfect, tiny, geometric pieces. My calm, my silence. It was unsettling them. They were expecting a reaction. They needed one. "Nothing to say," my mother pressed, her voice sharp. "New defense, new promises to do better. Which brings us," my father announced, cutting her off, "to your gift." My mother reached into her designer purse and pulled out a heavy, gold leaf envelope. It looked like a wedding invitation. She slid it across the polished mahogany table. "From all of us," she said, smiling like a knife. "A fresh start." The room fell silent. Jessica's phone clicked as she zoomed in, recording every second. I opened the heavy envelope. Inside, printed on expensive cardstock, was the coldest thing I'd ever read. At the top, notice of disownment. 3 short paragraphs declared that I, Belle Miller, was no longer part of the family, no inheritance, not name, no support. And at the bottom were 3 signatures: Michael, Jennifer, Jessica. They waited for tears, for begging, for a collapse they could savor. Instead, I folded the paper, slipped it into my purse, and smiled cold. "Steady. New. Thank you," I said, This makes everything so much easier. Their confusion almost made up for 30 years of being the scapegoat. I stood, set down my napkin, and grabbed my coat. I have a big day tomorrow. Sit down, my father barked. Your show is over, I said softly. Mine starts at 9 a.m. I walked out, leaving them stunned. March 15th. The annual art benefit, Gala New York's social Super Bowl. My family sat proudly at table 1. Unaware I was backstage, watching them on the monitor. At 9 p.m., the CEO took the stage and announced a $75 million cultural initiative. Then his voice boomed. Please welcome our new director of culture, Belle. I stepped into the spotlight in a black Valentino dress. All eyes turned to table 1. My mother dropped her champagne. Jessica dropped her phone. My father went pale. I delivered my keynote, my proposal, my strategy, my work. The standing ovation shook the room. Then my family confronted me. My mother hissed. You made us look like fools. I calmly reminded her I was disowned. You notarized it. Jessica snapped, accusing me of stealing her thesis. I stepped closer. That's interesting. Since I have the original version, I wrote 2 years before you graduated. Silence. Security appeared. I nodded to them. These individuals are harassing me. They're not on my guest list. My mother gasped. We're your family. No, I said. Your document says you're not. They were escorted out in front of everyone. The fallout was brutal. Society pages published photos of my mother being removed. She was forced to resign from committees. Her clients vanished. My father's firm faced investor panic. Jessica became toxic after the ethics investigation began. Meanwhile, I stood in my new office with floor-to-ceiling windows. The disownment notice framed hangs beside my degree. Today, I signed the papers for the Bell Miller Fellowship, funding another art history student who reminds me of who I once was. My family didn't destroy me. They released me. The document meant to break me became my permission to rise. Have you ever had to choose yourself over the people who should have chosen you first? Tell me your story. You're not alone.